Faith as small as a mustard seed can move mountains. Hello again, welcome to another video. This is another video from our series entitled Who Knew?, where we cover a series of Bible passages that the majority of the Christian church appears to misunderstand or otherwise miss the mark on. And today we are moving mountains. Our passage is from the words of Jesus found in Matthew chapter 17, another well-known passage of Scripture, chapter 17. And let's look at verses 19 to 20, starting out. So Matthew 17, verse 19 reads, "Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, 'Why could we not cast it out?' And he said to them, 'Because of your meager faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you.'" So the context of this passage, just briefly, is there is a demon-possessed boy, and the disciples evidently are approached by the Father, and they attempt to drive out the demon. They are unsuccessful in doing so, and then that sets the stage for this interaction that we read about between Jesus and the boy, and Jesus and the disciples. Now, the Christian church will often understand this passage to mean something along the lines of the incredible earthly powers that we can unlock through our faith. I was actually looking at a book review just a few weeks ago, and it was touting that exact subject, that basically that marketing tagline, that if we have faith, if we have a strong faith, it will grant us all kinds of powers to do all kinds of amazing things. And the other thing I would say is that I mentioned in an earlier video that I was corresponding with a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and interestingly, they were espousing the same idea about how through faith we can have all of these amazing and miraculous powers to do all these incredible things. In the example of the Jehovah's Witnesses, they cited the example of Abraham and how Abraham, through his faith, became powerful. So we might ask the question, well, what's the issue? What's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is if we follow along from that idea, I just don't see that in the Bible, right? If we take the example of Abraham, who I just mentioned, the only thing remarkable about the faith story of Abraham was that he was old, right? He got really old and really frail, and then he fathered a child. That is the remarkable story of Abraham. I don't see power in the life of Abraham. I see God bringing forth great things. I see God fulfilling his promises, but fulfilling those promises out of weakness, not out of strength, not out of power. I think that is the takeaway from the life of Abraham, particularly if you consider the angle of Sarah and Hagar as well. It's actually, if you broaden the story, it's about an amazing promise made from God, and it's about Abraham and Sarah's attempts to fulfill those purposes in their own power and fathering Ishmael, and then God saying, basically, yeah, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in me fulfilling the promise through you, through the life of Isaac. As I said, Abraham was an old man. He was not strong. He was not powerful. He was weak. And God did it anyway. That is the story of Abraham. But not only that, that's the life of Abraham. What would we say about someone like the Apostle Paul? If we read a passage like 2 Corinthians, let's go, that's 3 Corinthians, that doesn't exist. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, where do we want to read from? From verse 23 here. I more so, in far more labors, in far more imprisonments, beaten times without number, often in danger of death. 5 times I received from the Jews 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I have spent adrift at sea. I have been on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my countrymen, dangers from the Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, dangers among false brothers. I have been in labor and hardship through many sleepless nights, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. Apart from such external things, there is the daily pressure on me of concern for all the churches. Who is weak without my being weak? Who is led into sin without my intense concern? Then he goes on to say, if I have to boast, I will boast of what pertains to my weakness. So we read here, Paul's really been through it, right? He's endured some stuff. So where's Paul's power? Where is Paul's faith power? Do we read a passage like this and do we conclude that, well, Paul's just not faithing the right way, right? He's forgetting to tap into his magical faith power, and that's why he's having to endure all this stuff. That must be the answer, right? Paul's just doing it wrong. And no, I don't think that's what it is. The other thing I'll say, if we jump back to the Matthew 17 passage again here. Here we are. I had someone a while back, I was talking to somebody about this very passage, and we were talking about the nature of faith, and they were kind of bringing this popular view about the amazing faith power that we can have, and I was expressing my doubts, saying, I don't know that means what you're taking it to mean. And they quoted verse 20 here to me. They said, well, faith is obviously powerful because Jesus says here, right? Verse 20, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you'll say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. And I said to them, is that true? Is that really, really true? They said, yeah, it's what the text says. It's true. I said, okay, so then do me a favor. I'm assuming that you have at least a mustard seed of faith. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't even be talking about this, right? So if you have a mustard seed of faith or more, do me a favor. Faith move a mountain for me, right? Don't do it anywhere near, don't do it anywhere near a population center, because I wouldn't want anybody to be put in harm's way. But go look on Google Maps or something, find an unpopulated island or somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, and faith move a mountain. Because if you're reading this passage correctly, not only should that be possible, But the words of Jesus here suggest that it shouldn't even be difficult, right? He says, all you need is a mustard seed of faith. It should be easy to do if you are correctly understanding and applying what Jesus is actually saying. But when you find that you actually can't faith move a mountain, you have at that point basically two options, right? Either one, Jesus lied. He made a promise here in this chapter that was untrue. Or option two, we're misunderstanding what he was actually saying in the passage. Of course, it's a rhetorical question, right? Which of those two possibilities sounds more likely? That Jesus spoke a promise that was a lie, or that we've misunderstood the passage? I'll always go with option two, given those two possibilities. So what I believe is that's not what Jesus is teaching here at all. In fact, there's some irony here with this Bible teaching, because I believe what Jesus is saying through this passage is really the exact opposite of what the church teaches on this passage. And I'll explain more as we go through. So if we look at this Matthew 17 passage, I want to start out by setting some context. And in order to do that, I'm going to jump through some scriptures a little bit, but bear with me. So setting some context. Obviously, the context of this passage is in regard to the driving out of demons. And the very first thing I will say on that point is that driving demons from demon-possessed people was not something unique to Jesus. It wasn't something that only Jesus did. If we flip over, if we go back a few chapters and we go to Matthew chapter 12 and verse 27. Verse 27 here, we see another argument between Jesus and the Jews, the Pharisees. And they're arguing about the power by which Jesus casts out demons. And Jesus says here in verse 27, "And if by Beelzebul I cast out the demons, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore, they will be your judges." So this is just a quick drive-by of this passage. We're not going to get deep into the text. But as I said, ultimately, there's this argument here between Jesus and the Pharisees. And Jesus says to them, well, in regard to driving out demons, by whom do your sons drive them out? So in other words, just supporting what I just said, that God had evidently granted the Jews the ability to drive demons from demon-possessed people. This wasn't an ability that only Jesus possessed. It wasn't an ability that was unique to Jesus. And now, related to that point, the traditional method by which people would drive out demons is they would begin by asking the demon its name, and then they would call the demon by its name, and they would cast it out of the person. If we make another quick drive-by here and jump over to Mark chapter 5 and verse 9, here we find Jesus here driving out another demon. And verse 9, "And he was asking him, 'What is your name?' And he said to him, 'My name is Legion, for we are many.' And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. Now there was a large herd of pigs feeding nearby on the mountain, and the demons begged him, saying, 'Send us into the pigs so that we may enter them.' Jesus gave them permission," and so on and so forth. But I remember I remember years and years ago, before I was even a Christian, I remember being aware of this passage, and it seemed odd to me. It seemed odd to me that Jesus took a moment to ask the demon its name. It's like, why are we doing introductions? It just seemed like an oddly out of place thing. But that was the tradition. You ask the demon for its name, and then using its name, you drive out the demon. That's what's going on here in Mark chapter 5. But there's one more thing, one more aspect to this. What if someone is demon-possessed and they are unable to speak? How do you drive a demon from someone who cannot speak if you can't get its name, right? You can't get the name of the demon because the person can't speak. Well, this is a significant question because the Israelite tradition was that this would be something that only the Messiah could do, right? Other Jewish leaders, as we've seen, could drive out demons from demon-possessed people, but they taught that for a demon possession when the person was unable to speak, only the Messiah could drive a demon out from that person. And that is relevant because if we look at another rendition of this same event from Mark chapter 9, we see another tidbit of information here. Mark chapter 9, and I think it's verse 17. So, as I said, this is the same event going on in the Gospel of Mark, and verse 17 says, and one person from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son because he has a spirit that makes him unable to speak." So this is exactly the situation that's going on with the demon-possessed boy, that he has this issue that only the Messiah can resolve. So with all that as context, we'll, I promise, stop jumping around now, and we'll go back to Matthew chapter 17 again, down here to 19. And so given all of that context, if we look at the passage again, let's begin here in verse 16. The father says, "I brought him," the boy, "to your disciples, and they could not cure him." And Jesus responds in verse 17, "You unbelieving and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you?" Right? Jesus sounds mad here. And what's his problem? Right? Why are they unbelieving based on what we've read to this point? Well, what we've just heard is that the father brought the boy to the disciples, and they evidently tried to cure him, but they failed. So, knowing what we know from all of the context, could the disciples have cured the boy? No, because they are not the Messiah. Only the Messiah could drive out the demon from the boy who was unable to speak. So, did the disciples act in a way that was consistent with all that they knew, with all that had been revealed to them? No, not at all, right? Because even knowing that only the Messiah could drive out the demon, they tried it themselves anyway, and they failed, but yet Jesus is right there, right? So you've got a thing that only the Messiah can do, and the Messiah is like 10 feet away from you, and they conclude, let's just give it a try by ourselves. Maybe we can pull this off. right? That's why Jesus rebukes their profound lack of faith, calling them an unbelieving generation. Right? Basically, what he's saying to the disciples is, what is wrong with you guys? You know that you can't do that. Why would you think you could do that? And I'm standing right here, and you figure that you'll just take a run at it yourselves and see how that pans out, right? And so Jesus's rebuke here, does that set them straight? Are they good now? No, not at all. In fact, what the disciples do is they conclude exactly what many people in the church conclude about this passage today. They basically conclude, oh, I get it. What we need is like a super power faith. We need to upgrade our faith power, and then with our faith power, we can drive out the demon. In the Gospel of Luke, you actually see the disciples coming to Jesus and asking him, please increase our faith. It's all the same error, right? The error is that if we can make our faith more powerful, then we can do all these amazing, miraculous things independently. They can be like our bag of party tricks that we can just do amazing stuff because we have faith power, right? See, the problem with the disciples is they misunderstood what they needed. They were asking for the wrong thing. They didn't need more powerful faith to be able to do things independently. They needed a faith that recognized their own limits to be able to act dependently, to recognize their own limits and the lack of Jesus's limits. So in this narrative with this demon-possessed boy that was unable to speak, all they needed to do was to go, oh, a demon possession and he's not able to speak. Yeah, I can't do that. That's above my pay grade. But we need the Messiah to do that. And by a great stroke of grace, he's over there, so let's go ask him, right? That's literally all they needed to do here. And is that hard, right? Is that super challenging? I mean, for some of us it is, right? For some of us that are, I guess, struggling in our faith and maybe struggling in our pride as well, our sense of self. For some people, it is difficult to acknowledge that we can't do everything, and that there's a point when we just have to stop when it's time to stop. But this is why Jesus here talks about only needing mustard seed faith. He's saying to them, you guys are misunderstanding. You don't need this big, huge, robust, immense, powerful faith to say, oh, yeah, that's beyond me. I can't do that. Let's talk to Jesus. Like, you only need a tiny little bit of faith to do that, to say, yeah, I can't do that, but I know the guy that can, right? That's all they needed to do here. And as I said, it's kind of funny, it's ironic, because so often the church misapplies this narrative in the same way that, yeah, what we need in the church is we need super duper powerful faith. No, not at all. No, that's not what you need. What you need is a mustard seed of faith in a powerful God. It's not your faith that's powerful. It's your faith in Jesus and the fact that Jesus is powerful. That's where the power comes from. And that leads us to probably the most striking part of this passage, found in verse 20, which reads, say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Well, how do we do that, right? How do we move these mountains? How is that possible? How is what Jesus is saying to us, how is that in any way possible? Well, simply put, rather than trying to act independently, we do these amazing, miraculous things through faith by submitting ourselves to the work of God, by offering ourselves up to be a part of what He is doing. How do we move mountains? Well, we don't by ourselves, but God might be in the business of moving a mountain, and if we're following Him and we're offering ourselves in service, we just might get to be a part of that. One of the examples that I've used in the past about, how do we move mountains? Well, let's think for a second about the Christian church. The Christian church has an estimated 2 billion members alive in the world today, spread, as I'm sure you know, spread all over the world. And if you take a look at those churches and you trace them back through history, backwards all the way back to their point of origin, much of the church finds its roots in the books of the New Testament through the work of the Apostle Paul. But how was Paul able to impact the world in such a profound way? Was he such a good evangelist that he was able to build a worldwide church? Did Paul have the knowledge, the skill set to build a global church of 2 billion people? Did Paul do that in his own power? Did he have that big, huge faith power that we've been talking about to bring that about? No, of course not. I don't know that anybody would ever claim such a thing, that Paul built this immense Christian church in and through his own power. I don't think that's true at all. What Paul did was God called him to preach the gospel to the Gentiles, and Paul said, okay, I'm ready to go. Where are we headed, by the way? Right? He just stepped out in faith, but through Paul, a worldwide church of 2 billion members came into being. Paul moved spiritual mountains, we might say, not in his own power. God did it in his power. But Paul received a calling, preach my gospel, and Paul said, okay, I will do that. And mountains were moved. So I think that is what's going on in this passage here in Matthew chapter 17. That's what I wanted to share with you for today, a reminder that Jesus does not call us to independent action. He calls us to dependent action. He calls us to serve Him and to walk with Him and to maybe do amazing and miraculous things through Him, not in our own power, but solely in His power. That is the story of Matthew chapter 17. That is the rebuke on the disciples, that they would think that they should be doing these things by themselves, and that they would think that when they can't, the problem is they need more faith power. No, they don't need more faith power. They need more esteem of Jesus and less esteem of themselves. That is a classic disciple error then and now. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching the video. I hope it was useful to you. If you liked it, please feel free to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done that. Maybe leave a comment if you wanted to discuss this some more. And again, thank you for watching. God bless you. I will see you next time.